Yes, thank you so much, Tuba. So welcome everyone. I think Tuba is going to proceed with the introductions as well. But to anyone who is new to what GCMER does, what we are actually about, we actually started about 2 years ago in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And the whole aim of GCMER is to ensure that all medical students have equitable access to whatever research related resources we can provide, and also to ensure that the countries in which research amongst medical students is not very propagated, we are able to assist in that process and also be able to provide equal opportunities which can help you reach the level of countries in which research perhaps is a part of the curriculum. So till we actually see that change in the curriculum, we are here to help. And for that measure, we conduct a lot of meetings and workshops and webinars like this. We also conduct meetup sessions like one that was conducted yesterday where people could meet their co-authors, which again I'm going to be talking about. And basically GCMER Kyrgyzstan is one of our first global GCMER centers, I would say, or chapters. And Tuba has been essential in developing GCMER in Kyrgyzstan as well. And I would really like to know where you all are from. If you're from Kyrgyzstan or India or Pakistan or like Georgia, Bulgaria, anywhere else, or even from some of the non-GCMER countries, and if you would like us to set it up in your country. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, Tuba, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to ask all the participants, do we have any medical student who is not from Kyrgyzstan or Pakistan or India? Like other than these three countries, do we have students from other countries as well here? If yes, please raise your hand. Okay. Deepti, where are you from? Can you please type in the chat box?
Hello everyone. Okay. Oh,
Hello.
I'll chat.
Yeah.
Is it okay to speak or?
Yeah. It's not an issue.
Hello everyone. I'm from India. I'm a recent graduate. I'm a recent MBBS graduate, and I finished my MBBS in NRA Medical College, Andhra Pradesh. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyone else who's not from India, or, Pakistan, or Kyrgyzstan?
Oh, you are you asked even those who are not from India. Okay, I didn't listen that.
No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Not an issue. So I think there's no one. So here in the chat box, I'm sharing the links to the membership forms from Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, or India. If you're not a GCMAR member and you're interested to be a member of this organization, you can fill up these forms. Here it is. I would also like to welcome the Vice President of Student Network Organization Kyrgyzstan, Syed Mohammad Huzaifa. Sir, would you please like to enlighten the participants about SNO Kyrgyzstan?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Tuba, for the acknowledgement. And yeah, first of all, I would like to congratulate GCMER and both SNO, the teams from both sides have been working very hard to bring up these webinar sessions, and I wish them very much good luck. And yeah, Student Network Organization is basically working here in Kyrgyzstan in it's collaborative part of the SNO Europe chapter, and as well as under the leadership of TUF, which is the network of WHO. So yeah, we are working here for the student to explore medical advancements, and definitely they have to work on the medical research products, so that nowadays you know that the medicine is working very fast. Like the tech side, we are looking in technologies. The technology is moving fast, so in the same purpose we are working very much in this region, as well as we are finding more and more like horizons to work with. And definitely we are looking forward to work with the students, not the students of medical sciences, but also we are looking forward to the students of biotechnology, of zoology, of botany, so that we can collaborate them and make them of a single platform, so that they can have enough like exploration of this whole setup. So yeah, that's it from my side, and I wish all the luck to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Josefa. If any one of you is interested in being a member of SNO Kyrgyzstan, or if you have any queries, please mail your queries to the email address that I have shared. Now, moving forward, let's begin the session, defining a research problem and finding ideas and mentors, which will be presented by Dr. Ocean Bell. She's a medical doctor, postdoc neuro ENT, and a healthcare consultant for medical tech companies. As a global president and founder of GCMER, she believes that finding a topic and starting your research is the first crucial step in your research journey. Ma'am, it's an honor to have you here. This session is the first event of ABC of Research, which is a series of 4 webinars designed to encourage students to kickstart their research journey. I request all the participants to keep themselves muted to avoid any disturbance. If you have any questions, type them in the chat box. At the end, all your doubts will be cleared. Also, the post-event form will be shared towards the end of the session. Please make sure that you fill it to mark your attendance, as only those who have filled the form would be given certificates. Ma'am, I would like you to take the lead from here.
Thank you so much, Tuba, for the introduction. And again, I would like to just remind everyone that this is one of the 4 sessions. So if you would like to make the most of it, just ensure that you are attending all the 4 sessions, which will be happening every Sunday, basically, starting from today. So yeah, so today we are actually delving into the most basic part of when you begin research, right? The first question that comes to mind is finding a topic, right? How do you find a topic? How do you find a topic that's good enough to do research on? And also, how do you approach mentors, and how do you decide who should be your mentor? And I don't know how many of you are equipped with doing research already. If any of you have published it, we would be glad to know what you've published, where you've published it. We always like to know what our viewers have done, so that we know our audience. So starting with why research, right? Because that is an essential thing we need to know before we even try to decide a topic or try to start research. So obviously we do research to solve clinical or scientific problems, right? So research is a problem solving method. That's the first thing that you need to realize. And we also try to fill gaps. And when I say fill gaps, these are basically knowledge gaps, which probably need to be filled so that we can progress, and we can go ahead in medical science, so that we can actually provide the evidence-based medicine to our patients, and also to build a foundation for future research, right? Because even though some people might think that maybe my research is not directly impacting clinical knowledge, or it is not directly applicable in the clinic, that's not the only criteria for good research. Good research can also be something that is so well done that it actually provides a basis for further development in that area, which can also be done by future researchers who are doing a literature search and who probably find your research paper and decide to go and build on top of that. But of course, the next question is, how do you decide which problem to solve, right? And also, how do you find these gaps, and how do you build a reliable foundation for future researchers? Because it's not enough to just do the research itself, but it's quite necessary to ensure that the research that you're doing is valid and it's extrapolatable. So if anyone of you know what extrapolatable means, you can write it down in the chat box, or I will also be discussing it further. So where do I start, right? That is the question that comes to a lot of medical students' mind who are getting introduced to research. The first thing that actually I started with in my personal experience was that the reason I got so inclined to do research was because I looked at textbooks and I saw a lot of mentions of unknown mechanisms, unknown etiologies, unknown lot of things, right? For example, phantom limb. Phantom limb is an orthopedic slash neurological condition in which in a lot of textbooks you will find the word unknown mechanism, unknown etiology. So that's actually where my curiosity for research began. And also, sometimes if you're working in the clinic and you look at patients and you see a pattern of symptoms or risk factors and wondered, like, how is this happening? Why is this happening? What exactly is the mechanism? Or if you have looked at previous research papers and seen the word future scope and thought maybe I can actually develop on this future scope, which is not being fulfilled so far. And then you can go from there. Now, the next thing is that sometimes you ask professors a doubt and many a times they are not able to answer your question, right? And from there you can actually understand the gap in knowledge which might be present, and you can actually try to solve it, or at least try to begin to solve it. So all these questions, right, all the collection of these questions lead to the identification of a knowledge gap, right? But this knowledge gap alone is not enough. You need to actually convert it into a valid research question or a research problem. Now, what's the difference between a knowledge gap, which might be present, and a research question or a research problem? Firstly, you need to define the problem, right? By measurable parameters. For example, what? What are you trying to solve this problem for? For example, it could be risk factors, it could be signs, disease prevalence, incidence, and knowledge attitudes and practices, etc. If you guys can think of anything else, or if you guys have already done research in any of these factors, then go ahead and write it in the chat box as well. And also, I would like to know if any of you know about KAP studies, or if you have previously done KAP studies. In whom are you going to measure all of these, right? You need to actually identify a certain population based either on age group or geography or socioeconomics or other health parameters or any other factors as well, or a combination of all of these factors, right? So for example, let's say that I decide that I want to do research about phantom limb, right? And I think that, okay, I want to understand what is the etiology behind phantom limb. So now I am trying to understand either the risk factors or the etiology, which satisfy the question why, what, right? And now you're moving on to in whom. In whom am I going to try to understand the etiology of phantom limb? Am I specifically going to focus on all the phantom limb patients? Am I going to focus on phantom limb patients after amputation or after some sort of accident? What exactly is my population, right? And in what way am I going to assess this problem? At one point in time, which is also known as cross-sectional, over a course of time, also known as longitudinal, in one group. So if you do it in one group, then it may be observational or interventional. So for example, in our case, let's just take the example of phantom limb. I would say that it would be observational, right? Because you would try to assess factors which might be related to the etiology of phantom limb, or you might be trying to assess the mechanism behind phantom limb using certain diagnostic methods, right? Or there can be other studies in which you compare two groups to actually assess different things, right? So for example, let's take something that can actually be compared between two groups, something as simple as knowledge, attitudes, and practices, right? So you can compare the KAP, or the knowledge, attitudes, and practices, between two, let's say, for example, medical doctors of two different cities, medical doctors of rural hospitals and tertiary care hospitals, towards, I don't know, diabetes prevention, right? So all of these things can actually be converted into proper research questions or research problems only when you define the problem with measurable parameters. That's extremely important, because the more vague you keep it, the less clear your aim is going to be, and the more you're going to fumble when you're actually trying to make the research design, right? The next thing that you need to answer is, has anyone else asked this question, right? That is, you need to understand the innovation and necessity of this topic. Because, for example, if someone has already answered the exact question that you're trying to find, right? So, for example, if I thought about this, that let's try to understand the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of medical doctors against the prevention of diabetic foot, let's say, in rural care hospitals and tertiary care hospitals in urban cities, right? So maybe there already has been research in this topic. So how do you find that out, right? Here comes the importance of literature review, which again will be covered in the third session, which is going to happen on April 24th. So I am not going to get into the details of this, but I'll just mention a few things. For example, the sources where you can actually find these previously done research papers are PubMed. Sometimes you can even find it in textbooks. For example, if there's a chapter on, let's say, diabetes prevention, and you are trying to understand what the doctor's knowledge, attitudes, and practices are, and you see it being mentioned somewhere, and you actually go to the reference section and you see, okay, there has been research done on this already. You can also go to Google Scholar or Web of Science. There are many sources, and yeah, I'm not going to get into the detail of that. And again, the question is that, can you actually narrow down your topic based on previously done studies, right? So for example, if we take this diabetes prevention KAP study, then has this been done in India, for example, or has this only been done in Europe and USA, or has this been done 10 years ago, right? So 10 years ago, maybe doctors had different education, maybe doctors had different means of actually understanding these mechanisms of prevention, right? So can actually something be done, or have there been developments which might actually change the outcome of this study? So even in that case, if the study has already been done, you can still repeat it, and it will not be counted as plagiarism. But of course, you have to mention that so and so study was done in this population at this point in time, and we would like to build on it. It would be enough if you just mention this as one line in your introduction and provide reference to this study, right? Now, once you've actually narrowed down your topic, the next thing is to understand the feasibility, right? You've understood what topic I want to do, and you've understood why I want to actually do this. Now the question is, can I do this or not? So the first question you need to ask yourself is, can I access this population, right? So for example, you might be doing a survey, or you might be trying to reach OPD or IPD patients, right? For example, there are many other ways of reaching patients, but of course, these are some of the most common ones used by medical students. So in this case, you'll actually have to understand that, for example, if you want to, let's say, study phantom limb, right? Then is the population of phantom limb patients coming to your hospital in the OPD or IPD enough to actually do the study, right? Or over the period of time that you need to do the study, are you going to get enough patients of this very specific illness or very specific pathology to actually be able to do the study? So that's something that you need to assess. And how easily can I reach it is the next question, right? Because there are many obstacles, of course, that are going to come in your research study. And the first obstacle shouldn't be trying to reach the population, because if that actually happens, then you've actually chosen the wrong topic, right? That is the basic point. Now, if you have a very long period of time to do the study, let's say you have a period of 1 year to actually collect the data, right? So in that case, okay, you can rely on a few patients that come to the hospital. Let's say 10 patients come to the hospital every month of phantom limb, and then okay, you might have a data collection of a sample size of, let's say, 120 patients or 130 patients, of which, let's say, 100 would provide valid data, right? So 100 is a good enough sample size for this, because phantom limb is not that common an occurrence. So in this case, 100 is a good enough sample size. Again, sample size calculation is a completely different topic, and that's not something that I need to cover today. It will be covered in the further webinars. Now, obviously, since we are medical students, or since I used to be a medical student and I have done research when I was a medical student, this is a very practical question that you need to ask. And I'm sure that many of you who have done research have actually faced this problem, that sometimes you need to figure out whether the research study that you're trying to do will actually fit into your schedule of exams, of postings, of any conference or submission deadlines that you want to do, right? So for example, in India, we have the ICMR STS study, right? And in that, you have to cover it up within a certain period of months, right? So in that case, you cannot put up a proposal for something that needs, let's say, 1 year to be completed, because in that case, automatically it becomes invalid, right? So for example, the phantom limb study would become invalid in case of an ICMR STS project. And then again, you can also use this to your advantage, right? So for example, you want to do an OBGY study, and it is coinciding with your OBGY postings. You're an intern, or you have a certain posting schedule, and OBGY is fitting into that. So you can actually align your research study to come into that period of time when you will have the easiest access to these patients, right? And obviously, it's always better to ask for help whenever you think that either you will not be able to reach enough patients, or you need assistance in making the study design, or you need assistance in anything else. For example, writing the manuscript, clearing the ethical committee, clearing the technical committee, because that again is extremely important, right? So the next step comes of approaching a guide or supervisor or mentor. These three things are actually not the same thing, because they mean different things in different contexts. But in your context, I would like to use all three of them together, because it doesn't really matter as an undergraduate medical student or even as an intern when you're doing a research study, then this doesn't matter that much, right? So the first thing that I would really like to tell anyone who is approaching a guide is, don't be clueless, okay? Because these guides have multiple students approaching them all the time and asking them, can you give me a topic, right? So of course they are going to try to oblige, if they are nice professors, and try to think of a topic to give the student. But if you do your homework and you have a fair idea of the topic, if not specifically, then at least generally, right? Do some literature review, maybe read up the textbook chapter about that specific topic, and go to your guide and say, I read so and I'm thinking of doing research on this topic. I don't have an idea of exactly what to do, because they don't expect you to have a very clear idea, but don't be absolutely clueless is what I'm trying to tell you. and try to build a rapport with your guide or mentor, right? Because these guides are actually going to be with you throughout your research study. And when it actually comes to submitting it for publications or trying to get the clearance from the ethical or technical committee, many a times this lack of a good rapport actually is very hurtful to the student, because sometimes if the mentor just doesn't like you, or they don't see you as like a equal contributor to the study, then they might actually try to remove you from authorship or try to not help you in that ethical clearance. And then again, the first point helps a lot, as in if you actually try to show them that you have put in the effort of doing all this, then they are more likely to have a good rapport with you, right? And always do your homework about the guide themselves as well, right? So for example, you're approaching a guide, so first try to find out, have they done research in this field before? For example, if I'm trying to do a research topic on, let's say, a phantom limb, right? So firstly, the question arises, should I approach an orthopedician or should I approach a neurologist? Right? So I will go through literature reviews and try to see in which journal phantom limb papers are published, right? That is a good indication to which topic is more suitable for it, because it can be combined, right? And the next question is, if I, let's say, if I approach an orthopedician, right, have they done research about the neurological basis of certain orthopedic diseases, right? Or have they done the post-surgical follow-up of certain amputations, for example? So in that case, they will already have some idea of the topic itself, and they will actually be able to help you better. So it really helps you out. And thus this topic actually build on their previous research. So for example, in my UG, I had done a study on low birth weight and trying to figure out the maternal risk factors for low birth weight, right? And when I thought of this topic, I actually tried to find out that in the OBGY department, who is working around neonatology, right? And who is trying to do research in that. And coincidentally, and this was very lucky actually, I found someone who was actually doing a lot of research on maternal mortality and infant mortality rate, right? So this is a very good overlap. So then I approached them, we already had a good rapport and it worked out, right? So it's always best if it's actually building on their previous research as well, because then they will also see it as being advantageous to them. And have they published in a journal you want to publish in? So this is actually I would say that this is sort of a research secret, but many a times if a journal has someone as an author who has already published in their journal, they are more likely to actually approve that article, because they know about the credibility, they know that this person's research is already been published, so the standard matches to our journal. So it's very likely that the publication chance of your paper will also increase. And of course, the last but not the least question is, are they known to help students in ethical and technical committees? Because you need your guide to actually support you when you're going in front of these committees, right? Because they are composed of professors who are probably your guide's colleagues. So you need them to be able to support you and not go against you in these ethical and technical committees, right? And I would just like to give you a pro tip. So all the things that I have mentioned are also very applicable when you're trying to apply for, let's say, a research elective or a research fellowship or even a PhD, actually. So all of these things help a lot in approaching any sort of guide or supervisor. And it's always best to approach your guide or supervisor with at least a list of 3 to 5 topics, right? So of course you can approach them with a general topic, but it'll be best if you can just narrow it down with the measurable parameters that I was talking about, and narrow it down to, let's say, 3 or 5 topics and approach them with it. There's a very high chance that they'll just reject all of them, or they might actually tell you that, okay, make some improvements in 1 or 2 of them and let's go with that. So yeah, half your work is done over there itself, right? Now, coming back to the ethical aspect of the study. So when you're thinking about ethics, it's extremely important to read up about the 6 principles of bioethics. Again, I am not an expert in bioethics and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it's always best if you actually know about the 6 principles, because then again, your guide will find it very easy to actually explain what kind of ethical principles you need to follow, right? One of the most common ones is anonymity. And when you're actually trying to get a questionnaire, let's say, out of a participant, then you actually need to ensure that you're mentioning to them, firstly, that they will be anonymous. And secondly, if in case any of the data needs to be followed up and you need to store their data, you need to make sure that that data stays only with you. Because in the clinical world, this data privacy of patients is extremely important. And the earlier you learn to practice it, the easier it will be for you in the future itself. And once you have actually figured out what principles of bioethics your study can actually satisfy or not satisfy, you need to apply it to your study design, right? And in this case, you can take the help of your guide, because I'm sure that they will be more equipped to actually help you with what kind of ethics are approved by the ethical committee, where the ethical committee might have a problem, etc., etc. So now that we are actually talking about study design, I just want to just dive a little bit into study design, not too deep, because again, we do have another webinar on it. But to establish your study design, you need to answer one very clear question, and you need to answer it very clearly, right? How can I most effectively meet the aim of my study, which of course you have established once you have the research problem or the research question, while making sure that this is extrapolatable to the population. Now, at the beginning of the webinar, I had asked you, what do you mean by extrapolatable, if anyone knows? So what extrapolatable means, that if you take a sample from a population, then that sample should actually be representative of the population in which you're trying to apply this formula or apply this theory that you're trying to fulfill. So for example, if you're trying to figure out the medical doctors KAP to diabetic foot prevention, then in that case, you need to ensure that the medical doctors that you pick out from these rural hospitals and these tertiary care hospitals are actually representative of these hospitals themselves, right? Because otherwise, even if you do that study, it'll just be a survey. It will not be applicable to future studies, which basically decreases the validity of your study itself. And of course, there are some factors to consider, which again, I will not go too deep into. Factors like confounders, right? That is, what are the other factors other than the things that you're trying to actually correlate, which might affect the outcome of your study, and you're not actually taking them into account, right? So you need to figure that out. You also need to figure out the biases which might actually interrupt your study design, and you need to make sure that you're eliminating them right from the beginning. That's why I always say that don't think about biases once you've actually crossed the data collection point, but when you're designing the study itself. And also, as I spoke about the extrapolation of the sample to the population, sampling again is extremely important, both the sample size and the sample quality. Now, the logistics to consider are, of course, the schedule, which I already mentioned the importance of, and then designing the pro forma or questionnaire for the data collection. A lot of times, students actually try to dive into the questionnaire design even before establishing a clear aim or establishing a study design and even establishing confounders. And what they end up doing is that they either end up collecting too much data, which basically puts off the participants and they sometimes don't give the correct answers, or they end up collecting too less data, which basically leads to a lot of confounders, in which case you cannot really explain your results unequivocally, right? You need to be able to account for these confounders that might occur. And the other logistic is statistical analysis. I know that not a lot of us like the statistics topic, but then again, even when you're designing your study, you need to be able to understand what statistical analysis principles you're going to apply to your study based on, let's say, the sample size, or based on what kind of study design you're trying to follow. And last but not the least, the contributions, right, of the authors and the co-authors. Who is going to do what? Who is going to do the data collection? Who is going to do the analysis? And most likely, I would suggest that everyone should write the manuscript together. Don't try to put it on like one or two authors to do that, because a lot of journals require everyone to be able to write the manuscript or at least contribute in some way. Again, this will be covered in the second session actually, which is going to happen next Sunday. So I'm not going to get into the details of it. Next Sunday, Dr. Anisha will be covering the different types of study designs. And yeah, you can ask her all your questions about this as well. Now, the final question, of course, is how to write and where to publish. And this will be covered in the fourth session, which is going to happen on May 1st by Dr. Anujit. I think he is in our audience today, so you guys can say hi to him as well. And he will be covering this, right? So I think I've covered pretty much all of it, but I would like you to go away with this one take-home message. That is, you really need to not be afraid to ask questions, to question the current practices that are going on, and just to wonder in general, okay? That is extremely important to be able to come up with the right research question and also have a good research design. So I will open the floor to any questions. And you can follow us on Instagram, where we post about our workshops, our events, and we also have some new events coming up. We also take suggestions from our audience, what kind of events you want. And the membership forms have already been circulated in the chat. So yeah, if there are any questions, you can let me know. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and also just look at the chat for a minute. Yes. Okay. Can we collect data before the ethics approval? I wouldn't suggest that, because the thing is that a lot of the ethical approval principles actually apply to the data collection. For example, in the questionnaire, sometimes you need to include the consent itself, right? So for example, if you don't include the consent, let's say, or you circulate a questionnaire and then you present it to the ethical committee, and then they say that no, but this question should not be included, or this should be changed, right? And then later on, when they ask you for the report of the results, you're not able to present the answer to the questions because you had already circulated the questionnaire. So no, I would not suggest collecting the data before ethical approval. Good question though, like I know that's a lot of people's questions. Yes, any other questions? Happy to answer. Yes, no problem. Okay. What are the best search engines to search for articles other than PubMed? I think that's the question. But yeah, so I wouldn't say there are different search engines, but of course there are platforms like Google Scholar, Web of Science, ResearchGate. There are many more actually, but the most commonly used by undergraduate students, I would say, are, yes, these: PubMed, ResearchGate, Google Scholar, and Web of Science is good because it gives you free access to a lot of journals which you normally don't have free access to, but it's quite controversial, so I wouldn't suggest using it as the first step of literature review. So yes, I hope that answers your question. Are there any other questions? If not, then we will wrap this up. The recording for this session is going to be available on our YouTube, and the link is usually put in the link tree in our Instagram bio as well. So you can do that. And yes, where can we get ethics approval? For example, a topic, mind and brain relationship. Okay, so again, it's always necessary to ensure that you're getting ethical approval from your institute, right? Even if it's a survey and you are a part of a certain institute, it's always best to get ethics approval from there, because wherever the majority of the authors are from, or if the study is being done in a certain institute, then the ethical approval should be from there. In a lot of cases, students are either not a part of an institute or they are between institutes. In that case, it becomes a little difficult. So it's always best to co-author with someone who is already in a certain institute, or just apply to an international ethical committee approval process, but it's usually quite costly. So I wouldn't suggest that. So yeah, best to co-author with a certain institute student or guide, and yes, get the approval from there. Yes. So I don't think there are any more questions. So I will end this here, I think. Tuba, what do you think?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. That was a very enlightening session. Dear participants, the post-event form has been shared. Please fill it, as this will mark your attendance, and only those who have filled this would be getting the certificates. Also, now to wrap this up, I'd like to thank Ocean ma'am and all of you for taking out your time. Before we bid goodbye, I request you all to switch on your camera if you don't mind, so that I could take a picture, if that's okay, everyone.
Yes, of course. I think everyone is ready.
Yeah. Say cheese. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I hope the session was informative. The next session, Types of Research Design and Data Collection, will be organized next Sunday, that is 17th April. Hope to see you guys next time too. Good night.